Hello, welcome back to my channel. How are you doing? Do you even remember me? Yes, I know I took kind of a long break again. Life has been pretty unstable and stressful lately, so to be completely honest, the whole video making process started to feel too much to handle for me, and I had to give it up. That is until version Luna 2 came out, because it changes so many things and there's so much lore that I just had to try and come back. So I still don't know whether or not I'll keep posting regularly. I will try. But for now, you guessed it, it's theory time. So a little warning. Of course, if you still haven't played through the whole Luna 2 Arc and Quest, stay away, there will be a lot of spoilers ahead. You've been warned, people. So, we have a lot to cover. We got a lot of new information, chiefly of course about the moons, especially the iridescent moon, which we now know was one and the same with the crimson moon that we knew from Canria. And speaking of Canria, we got to see what happened right before the cataclysm. So not only does now this whole Crimson Moon Eclipse Dynasty business make a lot more sense, but also we literally got to play through the night where the sinners became the sinners. We will talk more about that in a minute. What else we got? So a lot of old and new characters showed up. We saw Arlecchino again as she helped Columbina, and then Barca finally made an appearance. It was about time after 5 years of waiting. He brought Albedo and During along. And Nefer also played a huge role. I wasn't expecting her to be this fundamental. What a character, guys. But most importantly, Dane's life showed up. And I don't know about you guys, but it wasn't the same Dane's life. He usually just stands in a corner and waits for the opportunity to strike the Abyss Order, but this time he actually interacted with everyone in an almost normal way. I had people tell me that he didn't feel like the same character at all. And why is that? Well, I think I have an answer. Because I feel that at the end of the day, what started as the tale of two twins and became a tale of great powers that clash against each other, you know, the sinners and the shades and the heavenly principles and the abyss, is going back, slowly going back, to be essentially a tale of various sets of brothers. Because you see, yes, we got to know a lot about Rerir, but there's another figure that showed up pretty consistently throughout the quest, and that is Daneslife's brother Bethrolnir. Now, I know that most people are focusing on the tragic love story between Rerir and Thelindis and the whole Crimson Moon business, but have you noticed how much of Rerir's slow descent into madness and even his choice to become a sinner actually depends on Bethrolnir interference? Let's break it down scene by scene. So the first time that we see Rerir and Bethrolnir interact is when the two brothers meet with Rerir for a drink. The first time that we take this trip down memory lane, they basically talk about life. So essentially Rerir's intention to propose to Thelindis, and Bethrolnir has rather a peculiar reaction. He just stays silent, and we can imagine that maybe he had a strange look on his face. We don't know. You know why? Because we never see him. Have you noticed? we now had a look at 3 out of the 5 sinners. We saw Surtalogi in Skir's story quest, we saw Verir in these memories and also in the present. We had a look at Reindotir in the Shades trailer. Raptatir we never got to see, but we never met him yet. Verfolnir, we met him twice already. The first time in the Caribert Archon quest in our twins' memory, and now here, but he's never shown. I wonder what this means. It's peculiar and it's really starting to bother me. But back to the memory, so Verfolnir stays silent, maybe throws a strange look at Verir, and Verir starts to get nervous. Now the second time they meet, we are already in our second memory trip, the one that was commissioned directly by Dainslife to Nefer, and this is important. So what happens? First of all, we see that Verir is becoming more and more insecure. He starts hearing a voice that he still doesn't recognize, that plays on this feeling, that plays on the fact that the situation is becoming more and more unstable and more suffocating. Right after that, the two meet again, and Verir tries to press Verfolnir for answers on that first encounter. Verfolnir, notably, is very secretive. He doesn't say really anything. He just gives some advice to Verir, and he plainly tells him not to marry Thelindis, an advice that he can't accept. After this dialogue, Verir will keep hearing this voice again and again up until the moment where he makes a bold move and lets the little girl Frithr go, the one who brought the Crimson Moon Marrow to the surface, and I think it's implied that Arlecchino comes from her bloodline actually. Right after this, he hears the voice again, but this time not only Verir finally recognizes the voice as being not just any voice, but Verfolnir specifically, but the voice also changes. Instead of just playing on Verir's doubts, this time it directly states something. You think you might have changed something by letting this little girl go? Do you think you're taking a stand against this system? Well, you know what? It won't change anything, because you will not save everyone. You can't save everyone, and by extension, of course, you can't save the Lindis. Why? Because you don't have enough power. And seeing how things will play out in the subsequent reconstruction, I'd say this is really interesting. What we see play in Nefer's little board game is essentially what happened right before the cataclysm. So we see Dainslife gathering the 4 pillars of Canria and basically rebel against the Vinster King, who has put his older brother Verfolnir into jail and also blinded him. We already actually had a reference to this night in the Wings of Fate course Intertwined, the glider we all got into our mailboxes on New Year's Day when Genshin launched for Xbox. But this time we actually play through the whole thing and get an interesting new information. So it wasn't actually Dainslife who got into the prisons and freed his brother. It was Verir's job, but since we do play from Verir's perspective still, we get to see what they talked about right before they went on separate ways for a very short while before reuniting again and splitting the power of the Abyss. And this dialogue is really interesting. The first thing we learn in this dialogue is why exactly Bertfulnir was put into jail. So according to him, it wasn't much for something he saw, but rather for something he said. In his words, it wasn't a prophecy, it was just a word of warning. Someone had to say it. Except he kind of contradicts himself in the next couple of lines when Rerir tells him his brother is basically rebelling against the king. Bertfulnir answers, "Everything is transpiring as I foresaw, yet I am powerless to change it. Fate is an immutable force. I can but lament as the inevitable unfolds." So he definitely saw something, right? What are we even talking about? And also something that really stayed with me is that immediately it made me think of one of the titles of a subquest in Caribert, a lamenter at fate's end. And that was the subquest where we actually met Bertfulnir in our twins' memory. So we're definitely talking about the same guy. Bear that in mind, guys. So the dialogue continues to unfold, and Rerir thinks he can use the leverage he has. So he is the one outside of the cell, right? And Bertfulnir is still jailed. So he tries to use his position to try and force Bertfulnir to reveal more about his fate. Now, despite being actually threatened with a dagger, Bertfulnir stays unmoved. He answers things about fate until Rerir decides to reveal that he hears his voice, Bertfulnir's voice, in his head. So when Rerir says that he knows that it's Bertfulnir talking in his head, Bertfulnir has a very peculiar reaction. So at first, he seems genuinely surprised. He asks, "My voice in your head?" And then he laughs. He laughs. And he says, "So you hear it too. The voice that steals your mind, gains your trust, and drives you crazy. It turns out that we are not so different, you and I." And that means that Bertfulnir hears that voice too. Is it the voice that, I don't know, whispers him the prophecies? And was it Bertfulnir's voice at all? We don't get an answer here. But may I remind you that the abyss is capable of mimicking almost anything, so there's always a chance that what Rerir heard in his head wasn't Bertfulnir at all, but rather, I don't know, maybe the abyss, maybe some other kind of power. What is interesting though is that the moment Bertfulnir knows that Rerir is hearing this voice too, he changes completely. His reaction is even highlighted by Rerir. We get those two lines detailing his expression. Bertfulnir just broke into the strangest smile I've ever seen in my life, as if he discovered some monumental secret. But then he suddenly switched to looking extremely weary. So it looks like he realized something, and this realization is somewhat crushing. But right after that, when he speaks again, he finally gives in and gives Rerir some actual advice. And what he tells him is, you must persevere. Whatever trials and tribulation you might face, be steadfast in the belief that they are your path to the future. So he's encouraging him, guys. It's the exact opposite of what he did the first time the two talked to each other. That time it was all about let her go, don't marry Tholindis, choose someone else. And this time he tells him, go on, keep going. And right after that, he sends him to the Universitas Magistrorum, where he knows Tholindis is. And what's even more concerning is that he adds this little comment. I'm sure we'll be seeing each other again very soon, Rarier. What is he even playing at? Because this makes it clear that Verfolnir, 1, knew what would happen, 2, he manipulated Rarier at least on this specific occasion, regardless if the voice they both hear is or isn't Verfolnir playing tricks. I don't think he lied. I think it's a third-party voice, but Verfolnir goes with it. Now, if Verfolnir manipulated Rarier, he could have done the same with all the rest, especially since we know he isn't new to this kind of tactic. All the way back in Caribert, we saw him do something really similar with Clothar Alberich. He offered him a help that Clothar couldn't find anywhere else, and this led to the foundation of the Abyss Order, and honestly to the Archons know what else, because might I remind you that we still have an Alberich around with a secret mission that we still know nothing about. I would be honestly very surprised if he turns out to have nothing to do with Verfolnir. But back to what happens in the past. If Verfolnir is indeed this kind of mastermind behind the 5 sinners, well, first of all, his role turns out to be way more prominent than we thought, even more prominent than, say, Raptatir's, the blasphemy of Logos. That would mean that we might have to think twice about how important that information we got from the weapons of the Stygian Onslaught is to the general plot development. Secondly, something really doesn't add up. Because you see, in Skir's character story, we learned that the power of the Abyss wasn't split into 5 parts. It was split into 6 parts. Yes, Dainslife also took a share, and it is this kind of power that actually allows him to keep that moon gate open in the final battle against Radier. So if he also took in some abyssal power, why isn't he one of the 5 sinners? What kept him from being corrupted like the others? The answer was actually hidden in the A Space for and Time for You quest, where Hadan, speaking to Dainslife, reminds him that he possesses a ring that continuously resets his condition and prevents him to fall completely to the abyssal energy that he carries. But this ring was gifted to him by his older brother, so Verfolnir gave him that ring. The same one who manipulated Rarier so that he could join the group. How strange. Especially if you try to put yourselves into Dane's shoes. I mean, you have 4 of your friends and your older brother, the one who you wanted to rescue from the prisons. You started a whole rebellion just for that, who suddenly make the choice of taking this absolutely destructive power and then just forsake your country, forsake your people, leave them to the fate that awaits them, and we know what Canria went through after that, and just leave you behind. At the same time, one of those people, your older brother, who gifted you the one thing that prevents you from going down the same path. How confusing and hurtful must it feel? And this really got me thinking. Are we sure that Dainslife commissioned Nefer to look deeper into Radier's memory just to understand Radier better? Wasn't he also perhaps looking for what happened in the prisons? Because you see, from Dane's perspective, he wakes up that morning, maybe has breakfast with Bethelnir, then each of them goes about their day until the moment someone comes to Dane's life and informs him that his older brother has been blinded, thrown to jail. Dane's life then mounts this whole operation just to free his brother. He commits treason for his brother. But he isn't the one who frees Bethelnir from the prison, and what happens next? Bethelnir goes with the rest. So, what really interests Dane's life here? Is he trying to understand his friend, or isn't he trying desperately to understand what his brother did? Dane's life sure targets the Abyss Order right from the start, and yes, this could be because of our twin, but let's not forget that the Abyss Order itself stems directly from Bethelnir's inspiration. Also, there is an interesting piece of dialogue that really gives us insight into Dane's feelings and motives. Back in Bedtime Story, we finally got him to talk a bit about his past, and he gave us the names of the 5 sinners. Now, the dialogue goes like this. Paimon first asks about the voice we heard in the previous quest, so in Caribert, in our twins' memories. Dane's life doesn't answer right away. What he says, he asks us, do you believe your sibling to have betrayed you? And when you hesitate, he does say, there's still hope for the 2 of you to reconcile. No, irreparable damage has not yet been done, but then adds, the sinner you wish to know about. His situation is different. He and his fellow sinners have long betrayed me and long betrayed our nation. And then gives us his name and adds, I'm loath to admit it, but he's also my kin, my older brother. Now, this could mean 2 things. Either Bethelnir's betrayal has been so deep that Dane's life doesn't recognize him as a brother anymore, or what he loathes to admit is that his brother could have done this. So he still cares a lot about his brother, and this is why it's so hard for him to admit that his brother did this to him. So what are we looking at? Are we looking at a story of immense powers clashing? Of course we are. The sinners have immense powers, and so do the shades and the heavenly principles at all. But what is the core? We started looking for our twin, and now we're looking at a younger brother desperately trying to understand his older brother once again. This is in fact turning in a tale about at least 2 sets of brothers. And if we have 2 sets, maybe in fact we could have 3 sets. Because you see, we just talked about Bedtime Story, but if we take another step back and go back to Caribert, we all know how that quest started, right? We actually met up with Kaya first, and then Dane's life showed up and warned him rather sternly about essentially letting the past lie in the past. And despite Kaya clearly lying his way out of that conversation, I would say that Dane's life was left rather unimpressed. But anyway, the real question here is, why did Dane's life go out of his way to talk directly with Kaya? He isn't one to mix up with regular people, right? So in this case, he actually takes action to warn him. Now, of course, this is because Dainslife knows about the link between the Abyss Order and the Alberich. But there is also a pretty strong link between Verfolnir and the Alberich. Not only have they been inspired by Verfolnir to create this whole organization, but also there are some clues that point to the fact that Verfolnir is the one who freed Clothar Alberich and all of his descendants from the curse. Talk of a special treatment. We saw Surtalogi propose the very same thing to his friend in Skirk's story quest. So it is rather possible that Verfolnir broke the curse on Clothar Alberich. If this were to be true, then Kaya has a strong, very strong link directly to Verfolnir, and Dainslife probably knows it. And coincidentally, Kaya also has an older brother, right? Well, sort of, at least. So maybe to check whether this parallel or potential parallel holds, we should look at Diluc and see whether or not he has some parallels maybe to Dainslife, like Kaya has some links to Verfolnir, right? Now, first of all, on a personality level, I would say Dainslife and Diluc share quite a number of similarities, actually. They both come across as calm, collected, even detached at times, but also they both have a strong sense of justice and of belonging to their respective nations. And this sense of justice has driven them to take sometimes rather rash actions. So we just saw Dainslife start a whole rebellion just to take his brother out of the prisons. And on Diluc's side, we know from the manga that he resigned from his position in the Knights the moment he saw them try to cover up or even suggest to cover up his father's accident. Also, both are rather hot-headed, or at least have been when they were younger, to the point where sometimes they can be even cruel. We saw that especially well for Dainslife in the A Space and Time for You quest when he faces Haden. And for Diluc, I would say whenever he faces the Abyss Order, he tends to lose his cool. Sometimes he really shows no mercy at all. And speaking of the Abyss Order, another thing those two characters have in common is that they are the only two characters in the whole game to have made a personal enemy of the Abyss Order. They target them specifically, and when you think about it, it could be for much the same reasons. Because yes, Dainslife has lost a brother who then inspired the Abyss Order's creation, and Diluc at least knows that Kaya is tied to this whole mess. So why does Diluc have a feud with the Abyss Order specifically? I don't know, maybe he seeks the answers that his brother didn't give him. The same way as Dainslife targets the Abyss Order to try and understand Verfolnir. This could hold, in fact. But there's more. Do you remember what Dainslife's title is? He's the Twilight Sword, right? Well, isn't Diluc like the Knight of Dawn or something? They actually go pretty well with each other, right? Now, there is one last piece of information in this game that really makes me think, that Dainslife and Diluc might be way closer to each other than we'd ever thought. And it is hidden in Diluc's collected miscellany that I'm going to show you at least the end of it.
Explosive, ruthless fighting style and his aloof manner are all admirable traits. But if the disaster from 5 centuries ago were to happen again, if he were to face the same evil that I once did, would he still hold fast to his resolve? This too makes me most curious indeed.
Now, Dainslife often inserts personal opinions and thoughts whenever he presents a character, but trust me, I've reviewed them all, and this is the only time Dainslife makes a direct parallel with his own lived experience. And when he says evil, I used to think he was referring to the Cataclysm, but after playing the Luna 2 quest, what I think is he's actually thinking of the moment where they split the abyssal power amongst themselves. Whatever happened after that, that's what Dainslife is recalling here. There can be no more direct parallel than this. Now, the real question is, can a situation like that which unfolded 500 years ago happen again? And if so, what role will those 3 sets of siblings or almost siblings that we talked about during this video have to play? So we got Verfolnir and Dainslife on one hand, the 2 twins on the other, and Kaya and Diluc potentially as the 3rd pair. Why don't we go back to a certain prophecy we got in the very beginning of this game? I am sure we will be able to get some new insights from it at this point. Now, as I am going to also talk about the original meaning of the prophecy in Chinese, I will actually reference a post I saw on Hoylab that talks about that, as I can't actually access the original myself. So if you happen to speak Mandarin, feel free to correct me, give me insights, guys. I will leave the link in the description, of course. So let's read it again, shall we? The original calamity had been overturned, yet the island in the sky set the earth to burn. So far, no surprises. This most likely refers to the cataclysm. Nothing had changed. Now, next we have our reference, probably to Albedo and Reindotir Chalk pursues gold, in this time inopportune, and then the eclipse is swallowed by the crimson moon. This one is interesting since it seems in Chinese it rings closer to the crimson moon takes revenge on the eclipse dynasty. And well, we saw what happened in the past with the Eclipse Dynasty and the Crimson Moon descendants. So I wonder, will there be more Crimson Moon descendants other than Arlecchino? Has she a role to play in the future? Anyway, this seems to be in direct reference to what we saw happen with Rarier in Rarier's memories. Now, I'm going to skip the next part for now and go straight to the last sentence. We'll go back to the middle of the prophecy in a minute. So the end reads as follows. Dane, what is that strand of blonde hair to you? Someone you must kill or the object of your penitence? Now, for a long time, we all thought this last sentence referred to our twin, since we saw on multiple occasions that the twin and Dainslife do have a rather strained relationship. But what if, with all that I've said so far in this video, this question concerned Verfolnir instead? They are blood brothers, and although MiHoYo conveniently avoided to show Verfolnir at all in even in this last quest, it isn't too far of a stretch to imagine that he could be blonde as his blood brother too, right? So if I think this strand of blonde hair to be Bertholnir, it would work very, very well with all that we've been saying about Dane being essentially focused on him. His whole purpose is to understand why his brother did what he did. Now, back to the central section of the prophecy. It reads in English, "The future must atone for bygone mistakes, as the bond familiar falters and breaks. Of the same blood, elders and the youth, such is the cycle of the world in truth." Now, here comes in what the poster on Hoylab said. Apparently, in Chinese, the concepts are much clearer. Essentially, what it means is that history repeats itself. So yes, there could be a situation unfolding just like 500 years ago. And in this cataclysmic event that will come to pass, the elder generation has to trust the younger one not to repeat the same mistakes. This actually leaves us a clue that will allow us to guess which of the two pairs that we have identified in this video as a potential parallel to Dane's life and Bertholnir will be the true one. So we have us and our twin on one side and Kaya and Diluc on the other, right? Now, if this is really about Dane's life and Bertholnir and future and past generations come into play, then we are kind of automatically out of the question because we simply aren't from Teyvat. We can't be Teyvat's future. But Kaya and Diluc, on the other hand, well, Kaya most certainly is from a future generation compared to Dane's life and Bertholnir, and Diluc, although he's not as linked to Canria specifically as Kaya is, well, he's still the future of Teyvat, right? Now, if all of this is true, there are two important things to note. First of all, the stakes are astronomically high. I can't see those four passing through all that is to come and coming out unscathed. Someone will pay a price, and that price has every chance to be really steep. Now, the second thing to note is the parallel as it currently is imperfect. Why? Because we have Bertholnir, the elder brother, being linked to Kaya, who is the younger, and Diluc, the older one of the other pair, being linked to Dane's life. So this scenario, narratively speaking, allows for three different resolutions. The first one is what I call the vertical parallel. So we know that in the past, Bertholnir saved Dane's life by gifting him that ring. This allowed Dane's life to essentially escape the consequences of becoming a sinner. He took the power, but he didn't pay the price. Kaya, the younger one, could do the same thing for his older brother. Or a second scenario is what I call the horizontal parallel. So maybe a situation will come in which all four are included. This is almost certain. And this is probably the most optimistic scenario, at least from my point of view. The two Cambrian brothers could reconcile, especially if Bertholnir has some shred of humanity left in him, and decide to kind of step aside and allow the two Mondstadt brothers to survive. The third scenario is what I call the reversed parallel. We know Dane's life tried to save Bethvolnir in the past. Well, Dilu could very well try to do the exact same thing with Kaya. We know that Dane's life failed. He failed probably because Bethvolnir did something. Now, Diluc could actually succeed, but this will mean that, well, we might have one standard character less. Personally speaking, I really hope that they will go with the horizontal parallel, even if this means, of course, that Dane's life won't ever be playable. If someone sees another way out of this where all four survive and are happy, feel free to imagine whatever you want in the comments. I need some hope, guys. Speaking of hope, there are some elements that make me think that the Mondstadt duo might have a chance to achieve what the Cambrian one couldn't. First of all, Mondstadt is way more united than we saw Cambria be right before the Cataclysm. Cambria had a literal civil war going on. Mondstadt doesn't have any of that, and we even got the Animal Archon reaffirming that he will protect every last Mondstadt resident regardless of his past. I wonder if he had anyone specific in mind, right, Venti? And now that I think of it, Venti also said he has some of Istarod's power, so the Shade of Time. Might be interesting since Bethvolnir is the blasphemy of time. We might have an Animal Archon on our side. Next, we know that Dane's life and Bethvolnir only had one major falling out right before the Cataclysm, at the moment where Bethvolnir joined the Sinners while Dane's life was left behind. Kaya and Diluc, on the other hand, already had one major fight about Kaya's role, identity, and mission. And they do seem to be slowly working that through, especially during the Paralogems quest. I don't know about you guys, but I really felt a big shift in their dynamic. I never thought they could act so familiar and relaxed with each other again. So they do seem to be mending their rifts, and this could bode very well for the future. Lastly, and I know I will get a ton of criticism for this, but I really don't care, Kaya and Diluc aren't real brothers. They aren't adoptive brothers either. What they are in the Chinese original, the only version I care for, is 兄弟. Excuse my pronunciation, by the way, I'm not sure I pronounced this very well, but anyway, it translates to sworn brothers, which means those two actually made a conscious choice to treat each other as a family member. And I don't know about you, but in my book, this is way more powerful than just happening to have a brother or having an adopted one. Why? Well, because you see, your parents might decide to have more children, or they might decide to marry again and, I don't know, welcome their new spouse's children or to adopt other children for whatever reason. You aren't necessarily a part of the decision process. But in this case, they made their choice themselves. So this could actually make a difference. They weren't forced to treat each other as family. They chose to. However you choose to interpret this. Now, This also gives me an opportunity to express myself on a topic that I rarely touch upon, and I think I've never covered it in my videos at all, just because I'm usually focused on other stuff. And I'm talking about anti-shipping. I don't personally care much for ships as a whole, but what I do care about as someone that cares for those two characters, so Kaya and Diluc, is what I've seen happening, especially in later years, on social media. I have seen, and I know personally, people and artists even that have been actively thrown out of social platforms, sometimes on the mere suspicion that they might see Kaya and Diluc as a couple. And the overall level of hate I see towards those who do see them as a couple is absolutely through the roof. And I really can't understand where all that hate comes from, because if I try to reason, even if I try to think of them as a couple, they would be two adults, not blood related, so there would be no incest, and they, as we've seen, have been working on their respective issues too. So at this point, there wouldn't be any toxic behavior either. So I really can't justify this level of hate over a fictional pair of characters directed towards real people who might have other problems, other issues in real life. I really think we should all take a step back and remember, one, we are talking about real people over fictional characters, and two, we are talking about one of the most important relationships in the whole game. However you see it, and I leave you below a link to a video that really challenged my view on the matter, they are still fundamental to this game. Their relationship, however you see it, is fundamental and will be fundamental to the development and conclusion of the plot. So maybe we should focus on that rather than on the whole ship or no ship business. That's just my 2 cents, people. That being said, I hope you liked this rather long ride into my theory making about version Luna 2. As always, leave me a comment, leave me a like, feel free to subscribe, and I hope we'll be seeing each other very soon.